this reading has been created from extracts taken from the German artist Cathedral writings, her letters and diaries, mostly written during the First World War, to her surviving son, Hans, who was in the medical corps.
The death of her youngest son, Peter, aged 18, on the 22nd of October 1914 at Dixmude in Flanders, cast a permanent shadow over her life. However, there was no word of blame or hatred for the enemy, only profound sorrow for the young men of all countries whose lives were sacrificed for the war.
Her son Hans, who survived the First World War, often asked his mother to write an account of her life, because although people across Europe had become familiar with her work, little or nothing was known about her personal life. She seldom spoke about her life, even to her children.
The work is important, not the person,
was her motto. But eventually, in 1922, she did present her son, Hans, with a large brown envelope, which contained a sketch pad with handwritten account of her childhood, her youth, and the early years of her marriage.
We have used extracts from these writings to create a picture of the young Käthe Kollwitz's life.
At the time of my birth, July 1867, we lived in Königsberg at number 9 Weidendamm until my 9th year. And ever afterwards, I remembered that house with nostalgia. I dimly remember a room in which I was doing pen drawings. But what I recall most distinctly were the yards and the gardens. By passing through the front garden, we came across a large yard that extended down to the river. There, the flat brick barges docked, and the bricks were unloaded in the yard. There were endless places to play, and numerous adventures in those courtyards. On the whole, I was a quiet, shy child, nervous as well. Sometimes I had these sulks that lasted for hours and even days. When I was in these moods, I could not find the words to communicate with others. My memory of my parents from those days is quite dim. Father was probably at work a good deal of the time. I do not remember Mother, but she was there, and that was good. Mother was never a close friend or a good comrade to us, but we always loved her. From early in my childhood, my father wished me to be trained for a career as an artist. I was conscientious and hardworking. My parents took pride in each new drawing I turned out. This gave my father great pleasure, and he wished me to have all the training I needed to become a great artist. Unfortunately, I was a girl, but he was ready to risk it. So after I reached my 14th birthday, he sent me to the best art teachers in Königsberg. One thing for which I shall always be grateful to my parents is the fact that they allowed Lisa, my sister and me, to wander about the town for hours in the afternoons. We brought cherries and then started off on what we called our loafing. We loafed through the whole city, took the ferry across the river and hung around the waterfront. Or we would stand and watch the men, loading and unloading the ships. We loafed our way through the castle, past the cathedral, and along the meadows along the river. All this loafing undoubtedly contributed to my artistic growth. For a long time, my work dealt with the world of the workers, and it can all be traced back to these casual expeditions through the city teeming with work. My brother, Conrad, was studying at the university in Berlin. When I was 17, I followed him there to attend the art school for girls. In my 17th year, I also became engaged to Karl Kollwitz, a medical student. My father, who saw his plans endangered by this engagement, decided to send me away once more, this time to Munich. That was in 1889. The life I plunged into Munich was exciting and made me very happy. I was delighted by the spirit of freedom that prevailed among the girl students. The days were filled with work. Evenings, we enjoyed ourselves, went to beer halls, took walks in the surrounding countryside. I felt free because I had my own house key. I so liked the free life in Munich that I began to wonder whether I had not made a mistake in binding myself by so early engagement. But in the spring of 1891, my fiancé was put in charge of Taylor's Krankenhauser in Berlin, and with this prospect of earning a decent livelihood, we decided to take the leap. Shortly before our marriage, my father said to me,
You have made your choice now. You will scarcely be able to do both things, a wife and an artist. So, be wholly what you have chosen to be.
So, in that spring of 1891, we moved into the home in North Berlin, where we were to live for 50 years. My husband devoted most of his time to his clinic, and was soon burdened with a great deal of work. In 1892, I had my first child, Hans, and in 1896, my second child, Peter. My life between 30 and 40 was very happy in every respect. We had sufficient to live on. The children were growing up and healthy. We went travelling to France and Italy. This period in my life seems to me very fine. Great, piercing sorrows have not yet struck me. My darling boys are growing more independent. I can already see the time when they will break free from me. And I look forward with some sorrow, for then they will have a life wholly their own. But I shall still be young enough for my own life.
The First World War began on the 28th of July, 1914.
Get the heroism to send them to face the cannon. The task is to bear it, not only during these first few weeks, but for a long time, in dreary November, and when spring comes again in March. That will be much harder. Those who have only small children seem to me so fortunate. For us, whose sons are going away, the vital thread is snapped. Cold, cloudy autumnal weather. The grave mood comes over one when one knows that there is war and one cannot hold on to any illusions anymore. Nothing is real but the frightfulness of this state which we almost grow used to. In such times it seems so stupid that the boys must go to war.
The whole thing is so ghastly and insane.
Occasionally, there comes the foolish thought, how can they possibly take part in such madness?
And at once, the cold shower. They must.
They must. Then one is ready to despair.
How can one maintain such a state of sacrifice?
Ketta's son Peter was killed on October the 22nd at Dixmurder, 1914, just 3 days after arriving at the front during the Battle of Yser.
That pretty scarf you sent will no longer be able to warm our boy. He lies dead under the earth. He fell at Dixmurder, the first in his regiment. He did not suffer. At dawn, the regiment buried him. His friends laid him in the grave. Then they went on with their terrible tasks. We thank God that he was so gently taken away before the carnage.
There is now a wound in our lives which will never heal. To give birth to a child, to raise him, and after 18 precious years to see his talent developing, to see what rich fruit the tree may bear, and then to have it cut short. I have in mind creating a sculpture in honour of Peter. That is my one goal for living.
I had conceived the plan for a memorial for Peter tonight, but abandoned it because it seemed to me impossible of execution. The monument was to have Peter's form lying stretched out, the father at the head, the mother at the feet. Peter, you will lie outstretched,
Holding out your hands in answer to the call for sacrifice,
your eyes open wide so you see the blue sky above you,
and the clouds and birds.
your mouth smiling, and at your breast the pink flower I gave.
This sculpture would be to commemorate the sacrifice of all the young volunteers.
Last night, I dreamed once more that I had a baby. There was much in that dream that was painful, but I recall one sensation most distinctly. I was holding the tiny infant in my arms, and I thought I could always hold it in my arms, and I would not have to give it away.
Arms of one that cried in there. Let me know how many of these things have arrived.
Our life is quiet. Peter is always present here with me. I suppose it is the same with Father. We do not talk much. We help one another. Nevertheless,
I am utilising the time to get ahead of my work. You know, you were both up in the studio with me and we talked about it. In all this work, Peter and you are present. Loving and having to give up what one loves most dearly and having it still always the same. How is it that for years the same theme is always present in my work? The premonition of sacrifice. But one is enough, Hans. One is enough.
Do you remember how we said half-jokingly that when you two went to war, I would sit at my desk with my big horn-rimmed glasses and read the Bible like an old grandmother? I am here now, reading the Bible.
For Peter, were the choice offered me? Oh, gladly, how gladly. Peter was a seed for the planting which should not have been ground. He was the sowing,
I am the bearer and cultivator of a grain of seed corn. But since I am the cultivator, I want to serve faithfully. The culture of a whole nation, in the final analysis, can be built upon nothing else but this.
Very slowly and gradually, I've been starting the work for Peter. How does work help me in these times? It is simply that it is a task I may not shirk, as you, children of my body, have been my tasks. So too are my other works. This is my post, and I may not leave it until I have carried out the obligation of the last item of the plan laid down in him. Then he may go. Probably that's the point at which most people die.
Peter was seed for the planting which must not be ground. Oh, if it had been possible for Father or me to die for him so that he might live, oh, how gladly we would have gone. For you as well as for him. But that was not to be. I am not seed for the planting. I have only the task of nurturing the seed placed in me. And you, Hans, may you have been born for life after all. You must have been, and you must believe in it.
The idea of eternity and immortality doesn't mean anything to me. The spirit of Peter goes on living. Peter's spirit is inseparable from his body. That is why, for me, there is no consolation in the thought of immortality. The one consolation would be to believe in a personal continuance of life. If he had had a child, there would be traces of him left.
When one says so simply that someone has lost his life, what a meaning there is in that. To lose one's life.
July to November, the Battle of the Somme. 1,219,000 casualties.
My dear boy Hans,
You keep us on short rations with letters. I'm afraid that your not writing indicates that you are having a period of unhappiness. But if you cannot do anything about it, at least write a card now and again, as you did recently when you sent me that terse note that you are well.
A sunny day, for the first time after weeks of storms and downpours. The sun shone into Peter's room. I am growing more and more fond of sitting here with Peter, where it is quiet and shut off. After I have opened the old desk, the 3 compartments confront me. There are a few books, which I like best, and a picture of you two as children. You must have been about 7 at the time, Peter about 3. You're standing arm in arm, and you are much bigger than your brother. Here also is a picture of Peter before his departure.
but where are my children now? One dead and one so far away, and I cannot help him. Cannot give to him out of myself. All has changed forever, and I am impoverished. My whole life as a mother is really behind me now. I often have a terrible longing to have it back again, to have children, my boys, one to the right, one to the left, to dance with them as formerly when spring arrived, and Peter came with flowers, and we danced a springtime dance.
Work today. I am making progress on the commemorative project. I think about little Peter's consoling words to me.
Don't worry, Mother, it will be beautiful.
In Peter's room again. Then I drove to Heinsdorf, and there walked a while along the canal, the roadside lined with willows. Peter certainly loved this place, and I heard larks singing. there was a feeling of tranquility in me.
If Hans is let to live, we should be able to see his future development, and perhaps we may expect children of his. If he too is taken, then all the sunlight that out of him lighted, warmed and made everything golden will be smothered.
Sorrow and longing eat away at strength, and I need strength. I beg that I may be able to do the work. Above all, the work for Peter, but also the rest of it. Once I have done that, I will be glad to die. But first, I must do that.
I made a drawing of the mother letting her dead son slide into her arms. I might make 100 such drawings, and yet I do not get any closer to him. I am seeking him, my son, as if I had to find him in the work. And yet everything I can do is so childishly feeble and inadequate. I feel obscurely that I could throw off this inadequacy, that Peter is somewhere in the work, and I might find him.
I wanted to tell you all this, my dear child. It seems to me nowadays that the most important task for someone who is aging is to spread love and warmth wherever possible. Life is so terribly hard now.
I have reread your letter of August 28th. Yes, such good memories. But now, Peter and Eric and Walter Mayer, all dead. When I sit here in his room, at his desk, and my memory of the boys is so vivid, I see their young faces, hear them laughing. I often feel very strange. Death and youth, the association is still incongruous. Oh, my boy, if only the war were over and you were here again and could live your life.
I am back again, as I always am with the war. The war, and those who lie silent. My dear child, goodbye.
War has been going on for 2 years now, and 5 million young men are dead. And even more than that number are miserable. Their lives wrecked. Is there anything at all that can justify that?
It is not only our youth who go willingly and joyfully into the war, it's the same in all nations. People who would be friends under other conditions now hurl themselves at one another as enemies. This frightful insanity, the youth of Europe hurling themselves at one another.
When I think that I am convinced of the insanity of the war, I ask myself again by what law man ought to live. Peter, Eric, Richard, all subordinated their lives to the idea of patriotism. The English, Russian, and French young men have done the same. The consequence has been this terrible killing and the impoverishment of Europe.
Then, shall we say that the youth in all these countries have been cheated? Has their capacity for sacrifice been exploited in order to bring on the war?
Where are the guilty? Are there any?
Or is everyone cheated? Has it been a case of mass madness? And when and how will the awakening take place? I can never fully understand.
But it is clear that our boys, our Peter, went to war 2 years ago with pure hearts, and that they were ready to die for Germany.
Oh, they died. Almost all of them, by the millions. Is it a breach of faith with you, Peter, if I can now see only madness? Only madness in the war. Peter, you died believing. Or had you all come to your senses and were nevertheless forced to leap into the abyss?
Well, Peter, that is over now. You are dead 2 years and turned wholly to earth. Your spiritual part, where is it? May your short life on earth someday reach perfection in another shape, perhaps in another place in time. In fact, I can often feel Peter's being. He consoles me. He helps me in my work. I am aware of him approving or rejecting, glad or sad.
On the 13th, we had wonderful weather. Warm, spring-like and sunny. I was on my way to the studio when it occurred to me that I would like to ride into the country. So I did, and I visited the Schildhorn Heights again.
Yes, that is really the place where my work must stand. The old pine trees rustled.
I sat there and thought about everything. And imagine, I found the tiny pink flower blooming. I gave one like that to Peter when he went away. It was the only flower I could find. You see, there are always visible tokens of connections.
It has been 1.5 years since I began the work for Peter. For the first time, there came the thought that perhaps I may be unable to do it at all. A work which is meant to last for many decades cannot be done in a short time. I do not know whether I shall be able to show it in plaster at my upcoming exhibition. I'm afraid not. But the show will nevertheless prepare the ground for it. Of course, I want to do more than this work, but above all, I must do this. I do not want to be called away before it is finished.
Hans, in your letter of the 23rd, you speak of seeing Peter's image before your eyes, wonderfully clear. It is so much harder for you, and for Father too, to keep him in mind. For all your work in the world takes you away from him. My work leads me back to him all the time. But often he recedes from me too. The best times are when I see him as you describe it.
1,000 pounds.
My dear boy Hans,
Strength is what I need now. It's the one thing that seems worthy of succeeding Peter. Strength is to take life as it is and unbroken by life, without complaining and overmuch weeping, to do one's work powerfully. After Easter, I worked concentratedly on my new exhibition.
Monday the 16th, the exhibition opened. It was a great success. My work continues to make such an impression, even after decades, that I will have achieved a great deal.
My 50th birthday has passed. Different from the way I used to imagine it. Where are my boys? Carl said he would like Peter's grave to have a gravestone. I thought that the relief of the parents might be set upon the grave. Then I realised that the relief would be more appropriate for the whole cemetery, life-size. Below or above it, here lies German youth. Or here lie Germany's finest young men. Or here lie the youthful dead. Or simply,
Here lie the young. My work seems so hopeless. I have decided to stop for the time being. My inward feeling is one of emptiness. Talking to people means nothing at all. Nothing. No one can help me. I see Peter. Far in the distance.
but I feel Peter nevertheless. See his dear, friendly smile. Father is here and stands beside me, firm in his love. And you, Far away though you are here too.
And friends. I never knew I had so many. So many who want to shake hands and say that I have meant something to them. What an overwhelming response to my work. Oh, Hans, it restores strength to me. If only I may at least finish those works which are now so dear to me, and not to lose another one of you whom I love. Yet, if it must be, then I should still have my work.
God grant that we may stay together in this world for a while yet. As you write, we are always together, we four.
Worked well this week. I can see more clearly that this way leads to the goal.
But I also see that the goal is very far away, that years will pass before I am finished with Peter's work.
For weeks now, I have been working only on the shoulders, back, and arms of the mother.
The year is 1918. March, the spring offensive. 1,539,000 casualties. My dear boy Hans, yesterday I kept thinking about this. How can one cherish joy now when there's really nothing that gives joy? That is what changes everything. The feeling that we were betrayed at the beginning.
And perhaps Peter would still be living, had it not been for this terrible betrayal.
Peter and millions, many millions of other boys.
All betrayed.
And that is why I cannot be calm. Within me all is upheaval, turmoil. And finally I ask myself, what has happened? After the sacrifice of the boys themselves, and our own sacrifice, will not everything be the same? All is turbulence.
Germany is near the end. Germany is losing the war. It is madness not to cut the war short if the game is up, not to save what may still be saved. The young men who are still alive, Germany must keep. Otherwise the country will be absolutely impoverished. Therefore, not another day of war when it is clear that war is lost.
Not another day of war.
All the years past come to mind. You and Peter. The years of childhood, so simple. Then adolescence, cares came. How could we advise you or help you? How many things one should have done differently. It is difficult to be an educator because parents are never fully able to cope with themselves or done with their own education.
And then the war years. The death of Peter and his friends. You going your own way alone, and not an easy way. I am upheld by the feeling that you will be guided by a good star. Perhaps it is Peter, whose loving eyes watch over you. May you find someone to whom you can give yourself fully, and who will love you. Your father and I love you as our child. Our only child now. We would have laid down our lives for yours. And for Peter.
There has been enough of dying. Let not another man fall. I ask that the words of the great poet Goethe be remembered. Seed for the planting must not be ground.
First World War ended on the 11th of November, 1918.
New Year, 1990. Last year has brought the end of the war. There is no peace yet, but there is no more war.
The past 5 New Year's Eves were turned backwards, full of grief, mourning, and longing for peace.
For now, all is future. A future that we resolve to see as bright. beyond the immediate darkness. No one imagines the good times will follow right away.
But we have finally crawled through the narrow shaft in which we were imprisoned. Now we see light and breathe air. Sculptures of the grieving mother and father in honour of the fallen youth of Europe in August 1932 at the age of 65. They now stand in Fladslow Military Cemetery near Dixburden. The father's eyes watch over the gravestone which bears the name of Peter Colvitts. This memorial was condemned by the rising Nazi Party because it expressed the pity of war and not its glory.
Hence, shortly afterwards, when Nazism swept through Germany and Käthe Kollwitz publicly took sides against it, she had grave consequences to face.
She was dismissed as a teacher at the academy and threatened, along with her husband Karl, with deportation to a concentration camp. She lost her excellent studio, and until the end of her life she was not permitted to show her work publicly. However, her status as an international artist spared her life at least.
To compound all this horror, her first grandchild, Hans's son, also named Peter, was killed in battle in October 1942.
Yet despite the loss of her son, her grandson, her home and her work, she never expressed hatred or bitterness, only a compassion for the lost youth of Europe, much as Wilfred Owen did in his poem.
Parable of the old man and the young. So Abram rose, and clave the wood and went, and took the fire with him, and a knife. And as they sojourned both of them together, Isaac the firstborn spake, and said,
My father, behold the preparations, fire and iron. But where the lamb for this burnt offering?
Then Abram bound the youth with belts and straps, and builded parapets and trenches there, and stretched forth the knife to slay his son. When lo, an angel called him out of heaven, saying,
Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do anything to him. Behold, a ram, caught in a thicket by its horns. Offer the ram of pride instead of him.
But the old man would not so, but slew his son, and half the seed of Europe, one by one.
To her dying day, Käthe Kollwitz declared no more war, and that all sacrifice should be engaged in creating a better life and a better society for everyone.
One day, a new ideal will arise, and there will be an end to all war. I die convinced of this. It will take much hard work, but it will be achieved. The important thing until then is to hold hold one's banner high, and to struggle